Hello, Rachel.
Hello, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing very well too.
Oh, you're not infected, are you, by an ancient alien weapon, by any chance? You would let me know that straight away, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just walk around serving me food and shit, would you? Would you? She's giving me that look.
Yeah, I would tell you.
Oh no. And then that's when you just scream, "Protect!" So, Yum Yum Podcast, this is us. Yum Yum because of the iconic line of dialogue from Star Trek Discovery's second season in which Commander Nandi, a non-character, responded with yum yum in reply to something. But we aren't covering Discovery anymore, are we, Rachel?
We ran out of Discovery.
It'll be back.
It'll be back, and we'll be back to it.
Yes, but for now it is gone, and we are covering Babylon 5.
Something that we actually enjoy.
Episode by episode from a rewatch perspective, which does mean a spoilerific perspective. Of course, we are spoiling it, we are rewatching it.
Spoilerific is the word for it.
Yeah, exactly. So, Rachel, we watched an episode of Babylon 5 called Infection, but before I read out the summary, I asked the question, who is the character that was most likely to say yum yum in reply to something for this one?
Nelson.
Nelson, the guy who became infected?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough thing because
Nagrath isn't in this one.
Nagrath isn't in this one. I'm gonna sideline it and go Garibaldi because he bought aphrodisiacs, and I really wanted him to sniff it and go yum yum,
or
and do
for
like some
the
wiggly
seller
eyebrows.
to say yum yum.
Yeah, that's a good one too. But I agree, Nelson is a good choice. Human Nelson or infected Nelson?
Human Nelson.
But he barely said anything, although he did give a very long handshake. And when I
was
mean long
thinking like when he's like getting infected.
Oh, right. And he's like, yum, yum, at his own skin.
Yeah.
Nelson gave a really long handshake. And I don't mean like when he was actually shaking his hand, but he extended his hand out and like what felt like he walked 5 miles long to get to Dr. Franklin to shake his hand. It was really distracting to me.
Okay.
Something I can't play a clip of because, audio-wise it doesn't work. But people just watch the scene. You'll notice that he takes quite a while to get over to Franklin.
Yeah.
But Marshall Teague, professional. He had his hand ready to go. So, Rachel, are we ready to go and talk about Infection?
What does the DVD summary offer up?
Because we are not reading IMDb's, we are reading the DVD's summaries, and they are wonderful. So, according to it, this is an interesting one. Smuggled aboard, scientist David McCollum, remnants of living machines. Unending peril, too, when a human infected by the contraband, Marshall Teague, morphs into a perfect warrior with a mission to wipe out all imperfect beings, making each resident a target. Whoa!
If he continues to build power at that rate, pretty soon he'll be strong enough to destroy the entire station.
So, the next chance we get to stop him might be our last chance.
This is considered to be one of the worst episodes of not just season 1, but the entire show.
Yes.
JMS himself has said out loud he's very disappointed with this one. He thought it didn't come together very well. Even the creator and the writer of this episode is not pleased with this. Many people don't like this. My history is I did not know that whenever watching it, so whenever I had rewatched this show, this one was always just one that I kind of zoned out with. It felt like a very mid-range TNG, TOS Star Trek episode where it's like, it's not offensively bad, but it's not anything special. And then to find out all these years later that this is carried around this legacy of being the worst one in the entire run, I feel like there's an obligation for me to really hate this episode or to have some negative feelings, but I really don't. It's possible entertainment, but it's one of those episodes where screw this in a little tighter, fix this up here, focus the angle over there and it would be a much better episode, but not a great one, just a
Yeah.
better episode.
Like, it doesn't hit the mark,
Mm.
but it at least hits the board.
And when you say it's the worst one of the series, I find that really hard to even grapple with because
You hate Byron so much.
this doesn't have Byron in it.
You
but-
hate Byron so
or
much.
Warren
it
Keffer.
it doesn't reach those levels because
and
it doesn't have a character that you despise.
no, and
as
it
much.
didn't, and its premise didn't insult my intelligence, or is one that I don't feel doesn't belong in the show. This is a premise that I think belongs in
Yes.
the show. While there are some episodes later down the road that we'll get to, hopefully, that I just roll my eyes at and go, no, this is completely stupid or useless. This here, it's half baked. And there's too many things trying to compete. But what has your relationship been with this? Because, yeah, not to go too far into it, but you also didn't really know the legacy of this episode when
No.
you first watched
No,
it. It was just an
definitely not.
episode.
I think this may have been one of the last ones that I watched on my own before starting to watch it with you. And I was just like, oh, wait. Were those first few episodes just a fluke? Like, because they had more time. Did they have more time to do those first couple of episodes and that's why they're more developed? And then I was just like, wait, is Infection gonna be more of what it's like week to week because they don't have as much time?
And Rachel from the past was correct in a lot of ways because this was the first episode they filmed.
Yeah.
This is production order number 1. And that kind of explains why visually a lot of this is somewhat reminiscent to the pilot film. Not one-to-one, but there's lots of moody, atmospheric lighting. You'll notice in the med bay there was a lot of
darkness and shadows.
and haze. In the med bay there was lots
Yeah.
of haze about. It wasn't smoke,
Like a
but just
weird
haze.
kind of filter on it.
Very dreamy
Yeah.
kind of aesthetic to this episode in many
Especially when
scenes.
they're in kind of like the down below and corridors and
Or the nighttime, or like lights
Yeah.
off in medbay sequences, or even CNC was very darkly lit in this episode.
Yeah.
And unlike in the previous 3 that we've watched, where it's been presented like this is a
it
normal
does
setting.
stand out as feeling different from the other ones.
So in a way, you subconsciously recognized that this episode, when you first watched it, that it kind of felt like an odd duck in the way you're watching it. And that's kind of because this is the first one, I do believe, that they filmed and put together. So it kind of has them getting their stride off of having done the pilot over a year ago. While the other
Yeah.
3 we've watched, they've already filmed a few episodes here and there. Actors and the writing and the directors have gotten comfortable in the groove a little bit more. While this one, odd duck. But you were saying you watched it and it was kind of like this, oh, is this a possibility of what the show is? Is the show, has it been a fluke till now?
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, if it was more like this than the other episodes, Ryan wouldn't have pushed it on me so hard.
This episode didn't have any ambassadors in it, so that's also a sign that it's different. It's the
Yeah.
first one without a single alien character in it, and you feel the lack of any
Yeah.
of them.
You see a lot aliens about the place, but you don't see any that we...
Yeah, you don't see
Really,
Kosh
no.
or Londo or Jakar or Delenn.
Like we said, no DeGrath.
No Nagrath. Nagrath needed to be here. Upon the years of rewatches, though, how does this episode stack up to you? Do you still have that feeling now that you've seen how the rest of the show progresses?
Well, I would not say that it is a sign of what's to come. It does have the symptoms that a lot of the bad episodes have.
Yeah.
Which, like you said, the main thing is that it just feels underbaked. Like, there's ideas here. Like, you get a sense of what they were going for, but it just doesn't feel put together or stick the landing, whatever metaphor you want to go with.
What doesn't make me so offended by it, and this is still a backhanded compliment, I do not think this is a good episode at all. I think it's the weakest one we've watched so far. Next to the pilot film, I think this is equal with The Gathering to me. What makes it less annoying than some of the other bad episodes to come, or some bad episodes in Star Trek Discovery, or some bad episodes in TNG, or DS9, or Star Trek, is this has several really possibly interesting ideas that are just languishing there. And that's better to me than one idea that would never had the potential to be good, TKO, where this episode, I could see this archaeology professor who's turned to the dark side of capitalism trying to woo Franklin to be a plot that you could have a full character plot with Franklin and his professor, and they argue the merits of what it is to be a scientist in the age in which you have to earn money at the same time. That's an episode I could watch.
I have a semantics question.
Mm.
You said the dark side of capitalism. Do you mean capitalism being the dark side?
Yeah.
Or the darker side of capitalism?
No. Capitalism being the dark side of being a scientist, or then you have the the monster plot with the background of the organic technology infecting someone running around, and you have the Sinclair stuff in which he's coming to terms with the fact at the end of the episode we discover this, that he has this death-seeking complex, this weird hero complex that he's got going on that we've been seeing seeded throughout the rest of the episodes that we've watched.
And that's something that we particularly discussed when we were talking about The Gathering.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it here later on because it's the most juicy stuff. All of those things I could see being developed into a fuller episode, but here they're all connected together and it feels like stitched. It feels like a patchwork.
Yeah.
A patchwork episode in which this is a Franklin episode, but I don't really know where I want to go with Franklin at the end of this, so now it's a Sinclair episode.
Yeah, and those were similar issues that we found with Soul Hunter as well.
Soul Hunter less so because it seemed
they were less present in Soul Hunter, but they were still there of like, whose episode is this?
Yo, that's a
was
thing.
A big
Soul Hunter had, to me, no focus. This one, my biggest issue is it steals the focus away from the one who we started from, which is Dr. Franklin. This is clearly supposed to be Franklin's episode, and then it just isn't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why that is, or what it, like, either be a Sinclair episode or be a Franklin episode.
Be one thing.
Soul Hunter...
Because you clearly want to be one thing.
Yeah.
It would be very different if it was a distinct A-B storyline and, like, this is the Franklin part, Sinclair is having this part, and then they join up and then diverge at the end. Because there are parts of that here that you could go, okay, well, we'll start with this part, like that starts the same, but we'll move the part with the ISN reporter to a bit later in, and then we'll have these parts, but just change around the order, and then the ending can stay basically the same.
It's suffering from the same issues as The Gathering, in which it's got too many ideas to the point of there being too few.
Yeah.
What you just described, we saw this work effectively with Born to the Purple, in which it was it was very much a Londo episode.
Yeah.
But Sinclair had his own little storyline going on that involved Londo, and they converged together, and he helped Londo out in the end. We needed something like that with Franklin. This episode needed to just be a Franklin episode. But at this point in the writing stage, it's clear to me that JMS didn't know how to write a Doctor storyline.
No.
He just didn't know how to...
comfortable enough with the character of Franklin and the storyline that this was about.
Yeah.
So he reverted things that he feels more comfortable with.
Which is cliched sci-fi monsters.
Yeah. And it's also like... That's the structure of shows that he worked on before he created Babylon 5 too.
Yeah,
It's not just that he's written them before, but he's had enormous success making a show that has that structure.
I mean, with the He-Man stuff, right, and She-Ra as well, but also with Soul Hunter, right?
Yeah.
Although we had issue with whose story was it, you know what you did know? It was a Monster of the Week episode. Okay, here's the bad guy of the week. This one... Infection presents itself as, oh, this is a Franklin episode. Like, you sit there and you go, okay, we're going to be having a lot of Franklin. which means you would assume medical stuff because he's a
Yeah.
doctor. Are we going to learn his medical ideology? Are we going to see him encounter something with medicine?
No.
And we do learn a little
well.
bit about his medical stuff, but
Not
not
really.
and then it's a monster of
That's
the week.
not the point.
And then it's a Sinclair PTSD
But that's
story.
not the point.
And then it's about how we must go to the stars.
But then that's not really the point either.
Starting to wonder if what we just saw is a preview of things to come.
Oh, I can't believe we'd be that foolish. Santayana. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
What was something other than the final conversation with Garibaldi and Sinclair, because that's a big thing we will want to talk about, you enjoyed about this episode?
I still kind of like the design of when Nelson is transformed and that kind of beetle.
Yeah.
The thing that he has to rip off and how he is slowly being transformed and that making it very clear that it is an infection
Yeah.
and it's organic attaching to organic. I enjoyed that. I like the joke at the start with Garibaldi buying the
Aphrodisiac.
slash floor
Wax.
polisher.
He was a sleazeball in this, huh?
Oh,
he was
he's
full on episode one.
cracking on
But-
to
but-
her so hard.
But this didn't end with the cute reveal that he actually wanted to watch Duck Dodgers. This was just he
No.
wants to fuck the pretty blonde-haired
Yeah.
reporter lady, and it made him gross.
I liked the little details that were sprinkled in that scene as well about how like this is ISN and the Interstellar
News Network.
News Network, and that they had a poll, and that there's still the same betting organization in London that's putting odds on these.
But it did
things.
line up with your
Yeah.
complaint in The Gathering, where they said that this was the 2-year anniversary
Mm-hmm.
of it. So The Gathering was around the time of it being open for 1 year already. So you should be at least happy with some
Yeah.
follow-up there. It was just that IMDb thing that got you.
Yeah, it acknowledges that, like within the show, that chronological
Yeah.
sensibility is there.
I like seeing Garibaldi be put in his place with his cockiness with that reporter, where he's all like, yeah, and then once she brings up his spotty record of the past, he's done. He's like, okay, I'm out of here. I like seeing Garibaldi be the fuckboy who then gets put in his place by the woman. It was very satisfying.
Oh, he gets shunned like a bad behaving dog.
Yeah, I was
quite a
going to say,
lot.
like, I'm imagining her rolling up a newspaper and smacking him on the nose, being like, bad Garibaldi, and then he, like, tail tucks between his legs and he runs in a little circle until he falls over.
Yeah.
I want to point out that a touch that I really enjoyed in this was that they're seeding something that we've already discussed in a previous one, which is Franklin is a workaholic. There was a throwaway line from Vance, his former professor, that they've been working at this for 15 hours non-stop, and he's tired, and he's like, Franklin, you need to, like, calm it down, and he's like being surly with him, like sarcastic, making these jokes, and Franklin's actually like, he's
War
actually,
of the Worlds reference.
and the joke is that Franklin is subverting that usual thing by the fact that he actually responds to it because he was
Yeah.
actually listening to him, which is nice. But it's setting up here that Franklin does not know how to shut off
No.
his scientific side, his work side.
If he has a problem, he must solve it, and he will work until he has.
Yeah.
But and that's really what drives him, because he's satisfied with the explanation that he's given at the start that, like, oh, this is just a heart attack. It's just a sad coincidence, or like
But I'll look into it. if I can.
natural
Causes.
occurrence. And it isn't until he gets more information that leads him to investigate over again.
But he's distracted because of the archaeological
Yeah.
finds. And it's very nice because it's done so small
Yeah.
in the series, and it snowballs into something bigger this is a part of his character flaw. When after he's been blasted by this monster man, his first instinct is to put his clothes back on and go to work, and he says, I'm fine, I should know, I'm the doctor. And then he stumbles over and is like, actually, whoa. And you wouldn't think of it in this episode when you're first viewing it, that this is a character flaw. You're thinking, this is a typical trope of the doctor who's like, I'll get back to work, but actually, no, guys. But when you're rewatching it, it's one of those little details that makes you clench your jaw a little and go, yikes, this is going to spiral out into something really bad with Franklin, because he is a workaholic. He doesn't know when to shut off. He's addicted to his work, and then he will further have addictions as the show barrels forward. And I liked those touches. The most compelling thing about the Franklin stuff, though, and it's the issue, again, this was a Franklin episode, and then it wasn't anymore. The most compelling thing to me was the debate he had with Vance about old versus new, grave robbing, capitalism, and furtherment of man through your own discoveries instead of appropriating others' technology. That was genuinely great, and it gave me a deep insight into Franklin's character. But where does it lead at the end of it all?
Doesn't play into anything within this episode, really.
No, because Vance, the bad guy's just like, but Steven, money, right?
Maybe if that worked in somehow more so when Franklin's turning him in.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really.
It doesn't work because this episode isn't about the ideological debate there.
No.
It engages that because, hey, JMS likes to engage these things, but this episode isn't about that debate of co-opting technology from previous existing cultures into something for yourself. It isn't actually about the dangers of space capitalism or the fact that scientific endeavors actually do have to rely on funding or, it's great to be an idealistic scientist, Franklin, but that's not reality. You can't just create scientific wonderments through just pure pep and idealism. That's not realistic, Franklin. You need to grovel, you need to beg for money, you need to compromise your values to pursue the science. And you don't understand that because you are just a GP at this point. I'm actually still out there going through these things. That's not what this episode's about. But what I've just said there sounds like it would be a fucking great episode to watch. Why didn't we watch that? I would have loved if Vance was a good character. He's played by a good actor, but he isn't. I don't even know how to describe his character other than just look at him. What a sleazy guy. That's all I can describe him as is you look at the character and you automatically know he's a villain.
Yeah.
There's no moment in which he makes a compelling point. Genuinely compelling. You understand that there's a kernel of a compelling idea there, but it's never discussed further.
Yeah. It never gets there.
And he's playing it like a sleazeball, so you never find his point of view at all interesting. Yet, it is. It could be really interesting to discuss how, because of the capitalistic construction around us, Franklin, the capitalistic structure around us, we have to abide by these things. We have to do things in certain ways that you might find unsettling, but it is what it is.
Did we already run out of positive things?
We already ran out of positive things. Is there any other things other than the Garibaldi discussion with Sinclair? I didn't mind the line about getting drunk with the other aliens from Ivanova, but I didn't care for that conversation overall.
I don't mind that scene. I think it's another nice footnote that leads to things.
Of which scene?
The Franklin Ivanova one.
About how we never learn.
How about how we never learn, but it also mentions those anti-alien groups.
The pro-Earth and how
And
militaristic
it sets up the next scene with
fundamentalists.
the reporter and Sinclair as well, further.
Yeah.
But there's no major positives.
No, it is a... I would rather watch this type of bad episode than a TKO or some of the episodes in season 2 of Discovery where there was nothing to generate even a thought. This episode, I'm constantly thinking about how it could have worked and what you could do to improve it, or what a version of this episode could have been.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have that thought exercise while I'm watching and discussing this than the tedium of episodes like TKO or episodes of Discovery in Season 2 in particular, in which I walk away going, I felt like there was no kernel of a good idea there and I wasted 45 minutes of my time. Here, I'm frustrated because I see 2 to 3 episodes worth of good ideas here compressed into a 45-minute episode, and none of it breathes and none of it becomes alive.
You failed. You failed in your mission. Ikara is dead.
The reporter, for instance, that was a great framing device to put onto an episode, and it's wasted here. Thankfully, we'll see in 2 more episodes down the line of this show, they will actually use this to a successful degree, or at least one that's more fully formed and fully dedicated than this. The idea of the Monster of the Week plot happening while a reporter on the ship is there.
But no, there's no real interaction with that. They kind of tease the possibility of it, and then she's just told to go away.
Here's a question that I'll ask you. Via just watching this episode, remove any knowledge you have of any other episodes, and I don't even think those will help you. Is she a good person? The journalist, is she good, or is she supposed to be framed as bad? Watching this, how are we supposed to take her character?
I don't think we're meant to feel either way about her.
But what do you feel?
I don't feel either way. I feel like she's a bit of an annoyance, and I'm scared that she's going to do a disservice to Sinclair because
he's worried about that.
Yeah.
I think
and she kind of approaches Garibaldi
from an antagonistic point of view.
Yeah.
But there you go. You just said it. What you just said is it's framing her in a bad light. That's what you're in a roundabout way of saying. Think about it. This episode frames this journalist in a negative light. But for what reason? Because when you actually sit down and hear the questions she's asking, they're the questions a journalist would ask in this situation. Nothing she says or does here is unreasonable, yet she's framed in a negative light because she's getting in the way of the stupid monster plot for our heroes. And I am so annoyed at that. You could have actually had a compelling character with this reporter lady, but she has no character. Whenever I watch this episode again, the only characteristic I can think of is her hair. That she has this 90s peroxided curly blonde hair. That's all I can remember her for.
Yeah, looks like it's bleach blonde and permed.
And that's all I remember her for. But when I was actually sitting down and thinking, okay, I'm writing this down, she's asking very reasonable questions.
Yeah.
And she's treating Garibaldi with a dismissiveness because she's smart enough to know that he's there to distract her from what she's actually there to report on, which is Sinclair.
Yeah.
And so she's dismissive of that. She's like, I wasn't here to talk to you. I'm here to talk to Sinclair.
He's avoiding me, and I just want to get my job done.
Yeah, and this is all raising red flags that people should know about. And because it's so I know I'm focusing on this, but it's such a small detail that could have been bigger. Because they handle this journalist thing so poorly, I started to think of something that the show doesn't want me to think about, which is, isn't it crazy that a city in space doesn't have journalists on it all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Why isn't there a fucking TV station there on Babylon 5?
Or at least a correspondent.
At least a correspondent, but you're not supposed to think about that at any
Nah.
point.
Definitely not this early.
No. And when the ISN episodes happen, they're done well enough that I don't care about that. But this one was done so poorly that I was thinking about it a lot. I'm like, wouldn't this be happening all the time? Wouldn't he actually have to be giving press conference? Like, wouldn't he have to be talking to the... And you're not supposed to think about that. And if this episode had framed her better and actually fully made her a more fleshed out character with an ideology, then I maybe wouldn't have been thinking about that. Like,
No.
when she's asking these questions at the end about should we focus on Earth, I did not take that as a foreshadowing negative thing about Earth first mentality. I was just thinking that this is her puff piece question because the actress playing it, to give her some credit, she's playing this journalist character without any sense of genuine evil antagonism or anything. She's just playing it like a no-nonsense reporter lady who wants to get her job done.
I've got a job, yeah.
So when she asks these questions, I'm not getting these chills of like, ooh, these are the proper.
What's
this is
coming?
these are the tinges of Earth First propagandary stuff. No, I'm just looking at a person asking a genuine puffy piece question
And that's
gonna.
after they try and set it up as being even more like that because of the conversation with Franklin and Vonivar.
But nothing about her character has demonstrated
No.
that she or ISN have a Earth First leaning to them. They're not presented in any way like a Fox News network or anything like that,
Nah.
which they will be later in the show. But I get frustrated because I'm looking at that. What a great framing device, and they completely waste it. And what do they replace it with, Rachel? Can we talk about the Vance? Can we talk about Vance?
What is there to say about that?
Is he the Trackus of this episode, in which he's like a black hole of nothingness and he just is a waste of time?
Yeah, like he's needed to be there because he's the tie that brings Franklin into it, and he's the mastermind behind bringing this weapon on board.
But Rachel, think about how you just framed it. He's there to
He's
do
a tool.
He's a tool.
He's a tool. He's not
A character.
a character.
He's not real in any way.
Very much a blunt force instrument. Even more than Nelson is in the end, I think, because Nelson gets that sense of his humanity being returned to him.
And taken away to begin with as well. Yeah, I want...
I point out the end because it actually takes him on a journey. Whereas Vance doesn't learn anything. He is not changed.
Well, and that's
he does not regret anything.
But that's the purpose, right? And you can have an antagonistic figure who's so blinded by everything that they, in fact, don't learn anything, and it's a warning sign. It's supposed to reflect back onto the
But
protagonist
it doesn't feel like
character.
it connects that way. It's just like, oh, that's a random person that popped back into his Franklin's life for a second, and
Yeah, and it doesn't work.
it could have gone very badly.
Yeah, it doesn't work because Franklin was never confronted by anything, really. He was never challenged on his own ideals. He was never wooed by this person. And I never bought that he had a genuine connection with this man in the past. I was never...
No, it was, the whole thing was just feels crackpot.
Look, Stephen, we can work all this out. We can sell the rest of the artifacts to interplanetary expeditions. They have enough muscle to clean up this whole mess. All you have to do is, not turn me in. I mean, just think what you could do with all that money.
What we needed to fix this episode is to remove some stuff and to focus in on things we've got. Like, if we want this to be a Franklin episode, remove the journalist completely. Remove that completely. Heck, remove Sinclair's stuff and have him be in the periphery, like in the Londo episode that we just did last week, and have the big important dinner scene with Vance and Franklin. It doesn't have to be a dinner, but you know that scene in episodes of television in which the characters sit down and they reminisce, relax, get comfortable with one another, have a friendly banter and rapport, but they're learning, and we are learning, that they're drastically different people.
And
we needed that scene.
And if, like, it's an old buddy, that they've changed from who they are. Like, most often it's our character that we know or are getting to know, and the other person realizes that they're not the same as when they knew them, and that they've moved on and become a better person.
But we needed to see from Vance some glimmer of the heroic good professor that Franklin knew, or we needed some variant of that, but instead he's sleazy and slimy and sweaty and greedy from the very beginning. He's transparent from the very beginning, and there's nothing charming about him.
Pick on. It's, I don't know, it's just hackneyed, I guess, of Franklin, Stephen, one of my best students.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that multiple times.
And it's artificial from the very get-go.
And it's just, like, why?
Yeah.
Why use that?
It's manipulative, but he's not a very good manipulator.
And it just makes the writing feel lazy.
Yeah, and it makes the
just
acting
like, what are you
stiff.
trying to do here? I don't know what you're... I'm assuming that it's because you want to endear yourself to Franklin more, but Franklin doesn't really deny that he was a great student.
He gives a little raise of an eyebrow, like, and then the guy has to clarify in what specific fields he was the best, and then he agrees. Like, Franklin's like, that I can understand.
I'll accept that compliment, whereas in other stories where that kind of thing works for me more is when it's a joke.
One of the disconnects I had, and I've always had, is he's an archaeologist and Franklin isn't.
No! And that's just
I know the episode tries to bend over backwards to explain why I should still care because it's organic technology.
No, it still doesn't stick. It just doesn't work.
There's that part of me that just needs this episode to be simpler, of a former friend and colleague and mentor of Franklin that's also a doctor comes in and there's an evil doctor plot with him. Let's talk about direction. This was directed by the same guy who did the pilot, and as stated a bit earlier, he has the visual flair that we saw reminiscent to that pilot. But I was noticing something that was really dragging down this experience that I didn't notice as strongly, if at all, in the previous episodes of this that we've watched.
But you did in The Gathering?
No, this is new.
Okay.
Maybe it was, but this was so striking.
Yeah.
And I looked this guy up, Richard Compton, and he's directed TV movies and stuff, and movies. Mm-hmm. But I got the strong sense that this was somebody who worked in theater. Mm-hmm. Because I was noticing the staging of scenes. There were so many blocking of scenes that were reminiscent to how you would block it on stage for the audience. Like, as soon as Vance walks in, take a shot. Every time Vance in this episode will walk straight up to camera with his back turned to Franklin, and Franklin will be on the higher ground than him to indicate that Franklin has the high ground. But that's such a stage. That's so theater. And I know you use it in
Yeah.
television too, but it was so pronounced.
The
here.
direction is very telegraphed of, oh, we want to say or show this thing.
Yeah.
What's the most basic and straightforward way that we can tell this?
And this could just be because it's production order number 1, but I was also noticing a lot of the actors, Ivanova in particular, weirdly, were told 2 things. And this again goes to theatre. Be loud and
Yeah.
use your gestures loudly too. Like Ivanova in a CNC scene, she was holding her hands and gestating wildly like it was for theatre. Because in theatre you have to hit it to the back.
Mm-hmm.
And Franklin, I swear a lot of his lines, he is projecting his lines as if he was on stage, not for TV. And that made this a frustrating experience to watch because there's a new level of artifice to this already weak script,
Yeah.
which is poor direction.
Yeah. It never gets that feeling. It never gets you interested enough or engaged enough for it to feel like anything but a script that's being performed.
A script that's being directed to be performed like it's for
Yes.
theatre. This feels like it's filmed rehearsals in a lot of ways.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
And we talk about how we have some guest actors here. We aren't doing the acting spotlight yet, but the guy who plays Nelson, Marshall Teague, will come back later to play Talon. And Talon was also supposed to be a one-off character who became a bigger character, but the difference between Marshall Teague's performance here and his ones as Talon is again down to direction. He's allowed to be more subtle and quiet, and in his first episode as Talon, he's just a guy with a sword screaming, but he's allowed to have more subtlety because it's being filmed like this is for television, the medium of film and television, while here, Marshall Teague, he's playing it big because it's like it's for theatre. And so if this was the only time we saw Marshall Teague in this show, it would be like, well, okay, but thankfully he gets to come back and show us his stuff, while the guy who plays Vance, he doesn't get to come back. So he walks away from this episode as an actor looking really weak, yet he's a really good actor.
Yeah.
But here, it's hard to see that. It's hard to see that, like we talked about with Trackus. You get these good, really good actors, but you're not utilizing them to the strengths of them as actors, as performers. I'm not saying that the guy who plays Vance here had to be the type of actor he was in the 1960s, but I would have liked to have seen his strength, which is charm.
Why do you carry 2 guns?
One of them is a novelty item, a toy.
Well, of course.
I believe it's the other one.
I do really enjoy the scene with Garibaldi and Sinclair. But I also enjoy Sinclair's monologue that he has with Nelson
When he's a monster?
when he's a monster, and like the message that he's so directly giving to the audience about the danger of fanaticism.
And yeah, eugenics and all this kind of crazy stuff.
And you can feel how deeply the character of Sinclair believes those things.
Are bad, yeah.
And then it makes it even more interesting when it comes to that loggerheads with him and Garibaldi, of him kind of questioning how much of that have I internalized myself.
I have a big problem with that whole sequence though, because it really does feel like JMS had those lines,
Yeah.
and then he thought, what's a story for this though? And reversed it from there. It feels like the whole entire Monster Man storyline was engineered for that sequence. For instance,
Yeah.
Franklin learns all this information off screen.
Oh, yeah,
and then he
it's just
does a
like,
walk.
just dump.
And then he does a walk and talk of
dumps
just
it on
dumping
us.
of information. Wouldn't that have been better if that information was doled out throughout the
Yes.
whole entire episode instead of Franklin Franklin becomes like a robot and his mouth opens and he's just shooting words at him.
Feels so rushed in a way.
Oh, because they're literally power walking as they're doing it.
Yeah,
It's just-
and they're trying to give the illusion of movement
and urgency.
and it's just like whatever. Like when it's just like Garibaldi keeps on being like, "Oh, if this happens, the entire station will blow up."
And we
it's
get the
just like,
British guy in
wow.
CNC being like, the power's getting bigger.
Whatever.
Yeah. The sexy British man, he's like, the power's getting bigger.
And I thought it was like, it's off the charts.
And I'm sitting there, and it's just a guy in a rubber suit walking around going, protect! And it's
I'm
embarrassing.
Like, oh, they really went in with the teal paint in the crevices.
But that conversation that he does have with Nelson, it's compelling stuff, but it is too on the nose. It is just too blatant. I know a lot of people raise their eyebrows up at Michael O'Hare's performances at times, and they raise it a lot of people raise this one up as like, what was he going for here? I understand what he's going for. His character has, it's what Garibaldi and him discuss. His character is seeking death, and he's just going fully crazed here. He's just fully letting himself off the chain and unleashing all of these harsh negative things out there, and he's being cocky, and he's being the worst aspects of his inner self that we were told about and shown minorly in The Gathering, and we've been shown minorly throughout the other episodes. So I don't have a problem with it, but it's in a story that... Is this what the story was? Well, I thought this was a Franklin episode.
What?
Now it's this, and
I do
it's so
just wanna-
frustrating.
I want to quote probably the best set of lines in this entire episode, right?
In the whole episode? Okay.
Yeah. When Garibaldi's talking about like how he knows a lot of people who came back from the war. And
Now, the conversation I want to emphasize with Garibaldi, I think, is 100% brilliant.
Yeah.
And that's fine. The one with Nelson, I'm just like, there's some really good stuff here, but a little ham-fisted.
I think they are looking for something worth dying for because it's easier. It's easier than finding something worth living for. And the fact that Sinclair is like, I don't have an answer for you, and I think I should. And that really sets him on
He's
a
up.
large part of his arc.
And it's in this episode.
And it's in this episode. It's like, it's got a nugget. It's got a nugget.
That's the thing about Babylon 5. Most of the bad episodes, they're still worth watching because they are containing an important nugget of something that will be furthered in the show. Infection is hot trash, but the conversation between Garibaldi and Sinclair is probably one of the most touching conversations in the first season to me. I think about this a lot because I am used to, as are you, in these sci-fi shows, the captain's doing what he did in this episode, running around and out-logicking the monster and punching him and shooting first and all of that. We've seen Kirk do it. We've even seen Picard do it. Sisko, definitely. Janeway, of course, as well. A lot of them. And they still do it now. In Star Trek Discovery, we complain so much about how they do that. So it's really confronting to see this standard of sci-fi be turned on its head, and by having the characters around them sit down and actually question the captain, the commander in this case, on what the fuck was that? What the hell do you think you're doing? Here's my theory. Is this what it is? And the fact that Sinclair doesn't have an answer to it. Not necessarily saying that is what it is, but it is. But the fact that Sinclair doesn't know why he's doing these dangerous things when he shouldn't be doing them is really a gut punch, because we are so used to these captains doing these things in these shows that we've become numb to it and we don't question it. Or you make jokes about, oh, there goes the captain running around on the planet with no helmet on and shooting things. Like, you either accept it because you have to suspend your disbelief, or you make jokes about it. Here, the show actually interrogates this idea, and by doing so, they've created a character for Sinclair. They've created this PTSD for Sinclair by subverting this usual trope and interrogating it. And to interrogate it, we have to give Sinclair a mental state. And they've actually been seeding it through in the previous episodes. We've been seeing him go out on these dangerous missions, and in those ones it's treated like, oh, it all worked out because it all went well, and he was never really, like, we never saw him get in real danger. It was all fun and laughs and a good sci-fi time. Here, he's in peril, he's in danger. Yes, it's against a goofy rubber man, but we see his ass kicked, he's acting crazed. We, the audience, getting to that point where you go, this isn't right. But there's a part of your brain as a sci-fi viewer who goes, oh, but that's what they always do in these shows.
Yeah, like, oh, I know this game.
And that conversation with Garibaldi and Sinclair, we get told a lot about Garibaldi without him explicitly saying stuff about himself. Although we do get little things, like the line that really gets me with him is like, I wouldn't know, like, about being a hero. I wouldn't know, I've never been one.
Yeah.
Coming from the security chief who, you know,
yeah,
you could consider doing heroic things every day.
And like,
but he doesn't consider himself one.
He was a part of Earth Force 2, and he did his share.
Yeah, he didn't serve on the line, but he still did his share. But Garibaldi has such low self-worth that he doesn't see any part of his career or life as heroic.
He only sees and feels his fuck-ups.
Yeah, which the reporter touched upon and touched that nerve. And I like that. I like that because although Garibaldi is sitting Sinclair down, JMS is also sitting Garibaldi down and giving us a little window into his mental state there.
Garibaldi is confronting Sinclair about a deeply personal issue. And to do that, he himself has to be emotionally vulnerable.
And he's revealing to us information that will be vital about his character. He's been all funny and quippy in games. This is the first really serious time where he sat down and fully dropped this, like, jokey thing. We had that moment with Londo in the first episode, but even that ended with kind of a quippy, like, it would be a pain in the butt. Here, there is no quippy, jokey. He's there saying, Jeff, what the fuck were you doing?
I think I've earned the right to do this.
I'm talking to you as a friend. I've known you longer as a friend than a commanding officer. What you're doing is trying to kill yourself. And isn't that crazy to think about too? We covered Star Trek Discovery, in which one of the side characters had PTSD out of nowhere, and then it went away. Here, our main character, Sinclair, has a form of PTSD from the war. He's got this, this death-seeking complex about himself that has been seeded through. We can actually point to these things, and in The Gathering, they bring this whole thing up with his big speech about the war and how he has these deep-seated issues that he's still working on. But unlike in Discovery, this conversation doesn't make Sinclair just smile and go, gee, Michael, I don't know the answer, but I should get on it, and then it washes away. We will see from this point on with Sinclair's character, he starts to grow and have an arc as the commander of the station. We will start to see less of these reckless actions upon his leadership and more about him playing it by the books. There's going to be a lot more episodes where Sinclair wins because he read the rules.
Yep.
He sat down and read the regulations. He's not going out there punching people. He's not being as reckless as he is here. And this conversation is really the motivator there, because his good friend Michael Garibaldi sat him down and said, Jeff, we're all worried about you. I'm worried about you. Have you even considered that this is an internalized thing within you? And he probably hasn't. And now he is, and he's thinking about it. And instead of the writers washing away this trauma within Sinclair, they're actually making it a part of his arc of him becoming a better person, him working on this issue and growing. And that's what makes Infection such a, I keep saying it, frustrating episode, because this is so good. This idea, this conversation, this beginning of an arc for him is so good. And it shows us that Sinclair isn't just the nice guy commander who's always playing by the books, that there's a darkness to Sinclair.
Yep.
That he has to work on, and the show acknowledges this darkness. It's beautiful stuff.
Michael, I don't have an answer for you. And I think maybe I should. Thanks.
We've talked about Vance a lot during this episode, but I think it's time to get into our actor spotlight, the part of the show in which we highlight an actor in an episode of Babylon 5, talk about their work in previous pieces of material or current ones, if we've seen them in anything before, and what we think of them in this episode. Of course, since I mentioned Vance, we're talking about David McCallum, who is best known for being in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., or for current generation people like ourselves, Rachel, NCIS as Ducky.
When he came on screen, I was like, "Oh, Ducky!"
Ducky. Let's talk about him in this episode before we delve into his career.
Okay.
What do you think of him? What did you think of him in this episode the first time around? Because you just said it. Oh, Ducky. This isn't Ducky.
No.
Ducky's nice.
No.
He's not nice here. So was that weird for you to see someone you associate as a nice old man with a little bow tie being a creepy capitalist?
Yeah, it was weird.
Did you buy it?
Sort of. Like, I kept on being like, oh, wait, they're going to flip this on their head, right? And he's going to turn out to be a nice guy, because I'm like, it's Ducky. And then I was like, oh, no, wait, he was just evil. Okay.
No. I remember it took me many rewatches to get past that it was Ducky from NCIS. Because that's what I knew him for to begin with. I've seen him in other things now, but I really couldn't believe it. I don't know what it is, but season 1 in particular, Babylon 5, I've said it. They hire these great character actors that obviously JMS and co love, because they're from this era of the 60s, right? This guy was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and
he also has, I believe, similar or like crossover credits.
Yeah, and he was
with our previous Spotlight.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say was, I know that he's in these era of shows. Like, I know he wasn't in Twilight Zone. I think he was in like another like anthology show that JMS liked him in. And what is it with Babylon 5 getting these actors though, and not using them in the way that you use them? Because the one thing I know about this actor, having seen him from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. or in NCIS, he is charming.
Yes!
Whether it be in a genuinely good, nice way like in NCIS, or in a kind of mischievous way in The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Mm-hmm.
Here, he's got no charm.
Got nothing.
There's no charisma to him here. Why did you get this guy other than you wanted to have him and you had a sleazy role for him to play? I don't understand what it is with season 1 of Babylon 5. You get these guys, for the most part, none of them do the thing that you want them to do. The only one who comes out unscathed, really, is Chekhov in Mind War, because he does the opposite of what you expect him to do. Mm-hmm. You think he would be goofy, but he's in fact intimidating, scary, and it worked because it showed us a strength that we didn't know that actor had. Here, you're removing the strengths of this actor, and you're not replacing them with anything. He is a complete void in this episode. I love this actor, but he is a waste of time here. Every time he came on screen, I was noticing that he was acting. He was doing this a lot, the shifty eyes. He was like darting his eyes around, and he always had flop sweat. I don't know why they kept doing that. Maybe it was real, but like they always gave him flop sweat, and it's like, I can't take this guy seriously.
Okay, what do you mean by flop sweat?
The flop of his hair
Yep.
was making his brow sweat all the time, and he just
like he
looked
just
like
has a sweaty forehead
and he-
all of the time.
And he looked like he was always wanting to wipe it off and do the shifty eyes, but I bet the director said, oh, no, we can't do the wiping there, David. It'll be a little too obvious. Now, if this was a space station that would allow you to smoke a cigarette, then we would have let you play with that, but we can't let you do that, David. So instead, he also do this. Did you notice this too? And again, poor direction here. He would pense his fingers a lot in this. I'm like, really? We're going to do the pensing fingers for the bad guy? Good job. But you're going to tell us some of the stuff that he's been in.
So he was also in BBC Sunday Night Theatre.
Oh, which Trackus from the previous episode was in.
And also in an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Yeah, that's right. Did you? Yeah.
Because like they were both British like UK actors.
I mean, yeah, this guy, I think I read he was one of the many actors who could have been in the run-up to play Doctor Who himself, but Tom Baker got it. Could you imagine this guy as the fourth Doctor with the scarf?
He is one of the last surviving actors from The Great Escape.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And that's something, The Great Escape. Fantastic.
He did he is still working.
Oh, yeah.
87. He's done a mix of TV and films. He was born in 1933 and had his first credit in 1953.
Okay, that's pretty good.
And one that it stood out to me because like I accidentally opened it and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
This movie looks trash.
And then now Rachel's going to do that thing where she names a classic film.
And it has it like advertised as like he's in this movie.
Well, that is the thing. He was a really big star.
He was the draw for this.
He was the guy from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. He's the Russian guy from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. who my mum always says to me was very sexy. She was like, he was sexy
a sexy one. Yeah.
He was sexy stuff. I love hearing that from my
mum. The same thing when we started watching NCIS. He's like, my mum was just like, oh, he's the sexy guy from Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Isn't it great that both our mums had boners for this guy when he was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
Yep.
As apparently did everyone, because you read the trivia fact, right, that he had like the biggest amount of fan letters for any actor working for MGM, including Clark Gable.
Insane.
It's hard to think that when you watch this episode of B5, right?
Okay, this
seriously, when you think about that, it's hard to think of that.
I didn't actually get to say what the movie was, and it had way too much build-up for what it actually is.
What is it?
One word title.
Poo.
Dogs. And the synopsis is... Do you know this movie, Ryan?
No. Is it about dogs?
Yes. It was a one-sentence synopsis.
Bark, 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 woof, woof.
A pack of dogs go on a killing spree.
I wonder if Stephen King watched that when he was writing.
It happened once. It could happen again. It could happen where you live. Will you be ready for dogs?
Play.
Hello, old friend. It's been a while.
Rachel, we have an email, finally. Someone in our listening audience out there has sent us through an email.
Thank you.
Thank you. We
asked so many times.
We've asked and we have received an email in response to our Soul Hunter episode 2 episodes ago from our good pal Nick. And he has written in to give us some feedback, some thoughts on those things. So let's hear what Nick has to say. He says, hey guys. Hey Nick. Just some feedback to you. So he has a few different points. So I'll read through them and we can respond to them one at a time. Okay, sounds good, Rachel? So he says, since we saw
You
Franklin...
didn't even wait for my feedback.
Okay, what do you think?
I agree.
Okay, good. He says, since we saw Franklin in the movie in the beginning, and he obviously did not have a good time, we have to assume the next 10 years were very good years for him to be so chipper showing up on a frontier station. Look, I'm going to say, I'm imagining that every Earth Force member that we see in the show had a terrible time during the Earth-Minbari War.
Yeah.
I think we don't even need to see the in the beginning to assume that they all had a rough go of it.
And within the series, Franklin does mention what
He
happened
got up to.
and how he was so angry at Earth Force wanting to weaponize his knowledge.
Yeah, and his whole daddy issues
Yeah.
too.
Oh yeah, all
But-
the daddy
But I
issues
still
for
have a
Franklin.
question mark on, like, I guess, like, still what we do know of Franklin throughout the show, and even in the beginning, it is interesting to me that he arrives at B5 super chipper and super
Yeah.
upbeat, which I still don't associate with his character. I'm not saying that he isn't a happy-go-lucky guy, but I feel like this was still the show early on trying to figure out the characterization for Franklin,
Yeah,
and they
but-
wanted him to be like the smirking doctor of the group, but they already had Garibaldi
I
as
have
the
another
smirking guy.
thought, which is that Franklin does seem to get a unique kind of joy from meeting up with friends and spending time with people that he hasn't spent time with in a while.
I guess.
Because that's the kind of energy that he brings to when he's first meeting Sinclair at the arrival gate.
Well, that's what
right?
that's what this is all in
But-
reference
yeah,
to, because he's
yeah,
just
but-
so
but-
upbeat.
But I wanted to say that that's a very similar sort of energy that he has in the finale when we see him meeting up and hanging out with Garibaldi.
Well, they're always hanging out. They just played tennis together.
yeah.
But yeah, he does have his chill side. So the second thing Nick says is, and this is something that's in a reply to a conversation that he's had with me on the internet, but here we go. He says, I still think that we either need to see dead bodies recycled into goo, in brackets, rather than just shot into the sun, to use in hydroponics on B5, or minimum they should have had Ivanova mention dirt shipments coming in. I mean, to replenish the garden soil, since 250,000 people eating the food would eventually have an impact. If you are not recycling something / someone, minimum, I assume the station collects all the bio-waste in the very real bathrooms for the garden. So Nick's proposition here is, instead of wasting resources by shooting corpses into space, into the sun, he thinks that we should mulch them and make them into fertilizer. And you have a look on your face that says no. And I also have a look on my face that says no, because I said this to Nick,
Yeah.
and here's my...
I think it should be a choice of the person.
Yeah.
Like, for me, being shot into the sun in this show is like the sci-fi equivalent of like a John Doe being cremated.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say is, in the episode that we watched of Soul Hunter, it is presented that those people who get shot in the sun are the people who are poorer, or their families are not rich enough to afford to be able to have their bodies shipped back to wherever they're from. So this is the station's way of doing this. Now, later in the show, they'll do this with soldiers too, and I always thought that was done with the soldiers because they were separated from Earth, and so they could not give the bodies back to Earth because they were wanted criminals of Earth. But I don't think that B5 is that morbid of a show to
No.
recycle the dead, because I think still in this show, I still think in this show, it is still clinging to the values we have in the current age in a lot of ways, and in most cultures, in most civilized cultures, we do have a respect for the remains of a body, whether we cremate them, whether we bury them. But I think we still have, and I think we still have in the show Babylon 5, too much respect for the human body to mulch them up into Soylent Green to put in the gardens for people to eat.
I disagree with that perspective. I don't.
With mine.
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily about respecting the body.
I think it is when Ivanova gives a little prayer.
I also just think that B5 is too capitalist to be for eco-burial.
Oh, it's awfully poor, though.
Yeah.
But I think Nick's point is, where does all the dirt come from? I always just assumed with the fact that we have so many ships coming and going, I always just assumed that they're getting replenishments from places.
Yeah, replenishments from places, and also like with sustainable farming techniques, you don't deplenish the soil entirely, like each time that you use it.
And this is the nerd shit where nerds like us and Nick sit down and watch the show and we think about these little details because the show thinks about little details, but really
and
the most important...
the hydroponic bay. And I do not for 1 second think that all of their food comes from the hydroponic
But the most important
bay.
thing to say is... No, I don't think so either. I think the most important thing to state is... The show still manages to captivate the audience enough with its stories and themes where these type of details don't matter. They don't actually matter. While something in like Star Trek Discovery, where they drop the ball so hard in the major areas, the little things like this actually do matter because nothing else matters. At least in B5, the episode's plots, themes, and characters are captivating enough and thought out well enough to the point in which I don't give a shit about the bodies being composted or not.
Tastes pretty good for shit.
So Nick goes on to say, I wish we got more Soul Hunter lore, to be honest. It's a really neat concept, and while the movie later wasn't perfect, I still enjoyed it. I don't enjoy the movie, but I'm glad somebody does. I was happy, the Soul Hunters are alright, lore-wise, but I don't know. I don't know. I thought this episode, the Soul Hunter episode, was enough. But what do you think? I mean, you like the River of Souls movie a bit more than I do.
Yeah, I do like it more than you do, but I think that for the most part, the episode achieves what they're looking to do.
Yeah, with them as a species.
It tells the story that needs to be told about the Soul Hunter species.
Nick also says in this comment, apparently the story idea of a hollow brothel was in the script notes for Season 2, Episode 3, the one with Ivanova being the most popular model. The fact that JMS also tried to get Claudia to go out on a date says something? I've never heard this. No. I don't look at the behind the scenes too much. I don't know if this is a true statement about JMS trying to get her to go on a date. I don't know. Don't care. Here's my hot take.
Well, he was separated from his wife.
Here's my hot take. The hollow brothel thing, that sounds exactly like a plot DS9 did. I think it is a plot DS9 did. Unlike DS9 though, I don't think holograms should exist in B5. Every time holograms pop up in B5, especially when humans have holograms in B5,
feel right.
It feels weirdly inconsistent, and it always feels like, oh, humans have holograms in this show, and then the holograms go away. So
yeah,
I that's my hot take on B5 is I don't think humans should ever have holograms in this show. I think if they did, they needed to bring it up more. Nick also says, I think there was an unrealized potential for Soul Hunters to show up on Crusade. Oh, Nick, the words, I think there was unrealized potential, blah, 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 for Crusade. That's enough. But he says, especially maybe how they relate to either Techno Mages or the first ones. And Nick's fan theory is that the Soul Hunters could be first ones or manufactured by first ones. It's Crusade.
Anything
could have been interesting to put in Crusade. Anything could have been interesting to put in Crusade that's from B5. And that's the reason why Crusade failed as a show, is it didn't introduce enough good stuff on its own merits that you wish that it brought in more stuff from Babylon 5.
It never had a chance.
Because the Soul Hunters were more fully realized in a singular episode of Babylon 5 than Gideon was in every in all the episodes combined of Crusade. And that's what I have to say about Crusade. And then here's the final thing Nick has to say. This is in reply to the William Morgan Shepherd as Jakar. He says, I can very much see him playing Season 1/Season 2 Jakar. But I agree. I don't see him giving the same kind of performance as the reborn version later. But I do appreciate that JMS seemed to reuse his name with Vice President William Morgan Clark and his one-eyedness with Jakar losing his eye in Season 4. Plus,
That's fun.
he was a really good Narn general with some great deliveries in Season 2, Episode 2. Look, you and Nick are on the agreement that you couldn't see William Morgan Shepherd playing the reborn version. I could. I think I also could especially see it being done really well because what did we find out about William Morgan Shepherd's career? 70% of his roles were priests. I think he could easily do the reborn version. I think he could do the religious reborn figure quite easily because he played religious characters for most of his career. And not just religious ones, but priests. So thank you, Nick, for the email then, for the feedback. It's very much appreciated. People, you can send us emails. We'll read that off later in the show. I think, Rachel, it's time to get into our ratings.
So what's your rating, Ryan?
I have to give it a yum.
It's a yum.
It almost touches upon some brilliant stuff and does occasionally touch upon brilliance here, but it's not enough to be a good episode of it. And I can see... But I still wouldn't say that this is my top 5 worst episodes of the show.
No.
I would definitely just say that this is D-list.
It's a bad episode, but it's not offensive, and there are
moments,
but there are episodes that are just blatantly offensive and annoying to watch. And I mean that in sense of like, oh my god, why does this have to exist and why am I watching this? I'm offended by its existence, not it's doing something offensive. Though there is overlap.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, are you ready to hear what we will be watching next week on Babylon 5?
Yes!
On the next Babylon 5.
Next week, we are going to be discussing episode 5 of Babylon
I knew that part.
5. No, Rachel, episode 5 of Babylon 5.
Season 1, yes.
Season 1.
Because we do these in
Yeah.
chronological order.
Not
We're
production
rewatching
order,
them.
yeah. Which is called The Parliament of Dreams. A great title. And according to IMDb, not IMDb, according
You're
to...
stuck in the old ways.
I'm stuck in the old ways. I'm like the Akarans. I'm stuck in the pure ways. I'm doing this actually from the DVD summaries, which is, as such, God, a religious convocation in the heavens. Earth Central's decision to hold a festival for all alien faiths is a good idea, yet it's a living hell for Jakar learns one arriving faithful is an assassin guild agent hired to kill the Narn ambassador.
I love this episode. It's not like it's not S tier, but I love this episode.
It's the first Jakar episode.
It's the first proper Jakar episode, and it also is the episode that gives us so much of the footage that's in the opening credits.
It is true. There's a lot of the opening credits footage in this one. So, people, make sure to be all tuned in and ready for that discussion next week. So, make sure you watch that episode.
Homework.
Oh, if you want homework, if you want to sit down, okay, children, you're my favorite student. Obviously, you're listening to this, so you're my best student. You're my best student. You're my favorite student. I want to give you a big handshake and walk all the way over to give you one, but we just don't have the time. You have some homework to do, which is, of course, rate and review us on whatever podcatcher you're listening to this on or whatever one can do it for you. Make sure to share our stuff around. There are people out there, poor people out there,
who don't know about us,
who aren't getting the yum-yum treatment on Babylon 5, and they need that yum-yum treatment, and you are the one that could deliver it to them. So do your due diligence. Do not take a shortcut like Vance, huh?
No
do
more
the right
shortcuts.
thing and deliver this glorious discussion about infection and many of our other episodes onto your friends, pals, enemies, lovers, whoever. Rachel, we also have our social medias that people can follow us on and discuss things with us on.
Where we are Yum Yum Pod or Yum Yum Podcast, depending on the platform.
We are on all of them, basically.
If you want to be taken directly to the one that you are interested in, check out that description.
Yeah, we're always posting stuff on those, always discussing things, always sharing some jokes, some memes, some further things on
what
there.
if that isn't enough and they want to hear
more
they want to
content?
listen to more podcasts from
us?
Yum Yum
We have
Pod.
a Patreon, so Yum Yum Podcast on the Patreon, in which we have extra bonus content. We discuss the Star Trek movies. We are discussing the best and worst rated episodes of Star Trek, and we are giving our general thoughts on other pieces of media, whether it be a TV show discussion, or general thoughts on something like How I Met Your Mother, for instance, or we are discussing podcasts, movies, games. Many of things are on there. All of this is in the description
You got
of the episode.
choices and an excellent back catalogue
Of content to look through.
Yeah.
And of course, we have our email, yumyumpod@gmail.com, if you want to send us your thoughts and whatever other goodness. And that's it. That's it, Rachel.
Yep.
We're done. Good eating to you, Rachel.
Good eating to you, Ryan.
Mr. Cannonball Day.